So I thought I'd talk quickly about adding pieces onto your carvings. Here I'm making some horns for the helmet on this character, and you wouldn't, when you're cutting your piece from the block, you wouldn't include this piece in the original carving. Maybe if it was thicker and shorter you might do, but most of the time when you've got something that's sort of sticking out like so, you wouldn't include it on your original block. So you'd carve this bit first and then add this bit later. Now there's several reasons for this. I mean, one, it would be a huge waste of timber. You'd be wasting all of this timber around here just for this little piece. But mostly it's because it's not going to be strong, particularly in something like this, which is a small carving. So if I were to try and cut that out of one piece of timber and using the grain on this is going this way, so this would almost certainly break, probably at this point here, or at this point here. So I make it separately. If it was a nose on Flocchio and it's just one straight bit, then we wouldn't have to, you know, if we were just putting a nose on like so, we could just stick that on and that would be fine carving, because we've got the grain going this way and it's nice and strong because it's going in this direction. Because I've got this curl here, I want to have this curl round. This is not going to be very strong. You might get some timber whereby you'd get away with it, but with this lime wood it's not going to work. And it's because if the grain's going this way, once it comes to here, it's no longer going to be strong. It would snap. So ideally what you want is the grain going this way and then this way and then this way, which is obviously not going to happen naturally on your block of wood. So what we do is we create it out of three pieces. So I've got some scrap pieces here, and this is a good way of using up your sort of offcuts and bits and pieces like that. So we're going to need a something to cut on, preferably flat. This bit isn't flat, so we'll find a flatter piece of timber to cut on, just to make it maybe easier for the camera. So we need to get a nice join between the two pieces, or three pieces in this case. So we can do this with a knife. You might be able to saw it. If you need to get to the rough shape, you can use a saw, but then you want to trim it up with either a very straight bladed knife or maybe a flat joiner's chisel. Now I'm not worried about making this the other side exactly the same. In fact, I want it to be slightly different, slightly in shape. If you do want to make it the same, then it's probably best to cut the two pieces at the same time. But I'm not so worried about that. I'm going to get obviously roughly the same size, but I'm not so worried about the actual shaping of it. So first of all, we're going to have roughly the same size. So I'm going to just cut it to length. We'll trim off a bit off this end first. Just, and so you might want to use a saw here to be quicker in trimming this off. I'm going to trim it there and trim it here. Now we've got our first piece. We've got our grain. It's going this way. If you look on this timber here, so the grain's going this way. This is where it's going to be nice and strong. If it was that way round, it would likely snap across here. So we've got the grain going this way on this piece. Now I want to cut a nice flat here where I'm going to get the join. So you want to get a nice flat surface so that your next piece can join onto. So my next piece here, grain again, it's going this way, but it's going to sit up at this angle, or maybe slightly at such an angle. But the grain along here is strong, so it's strong in this direction where it needs to be. So I'm going to trim up the end here. Make sure I get a very straight end on here. Nice flat surface. Because you want these two surfaces to mate together as best they can, so you want to look around and make sure you've got no gaps. If you've got gaps, then you need to recut. I've got a little bit of a gap at the end there. It's probably on this piece. So I'm going to just pare it off again and try and make sure it's cut nice and straight all the way down. As I say, you might want to use a chisel on this, particularly if they're bigger pieces. These are quite small, so actually the tools work fine, but if you've got a real sort of bigger piece of wood, then a nice straight chisel would work well on here. So keep going until you've got a nice flat piece like so, where you get a nice tight join all the way round. When we've got that, we can look at the next angle. So it's going to be quite a short piece, this one. Trim it up like so. So you might want to cut these pieces, depending on the shape. Obviously, if you're making something else like a hammer or something, you might want to cut the rough shape first before you do the joining, or even do a lot of the carving before you do the joining. So if I was doing like a hammer handle, I'd probably carve the handle and the head first, and then the last bit would be to join the two pieces together. But I'm going to carve, because these sort of shapes need to flow, I'm going to carve them afterwards. So with that piece on there, the join this time we've got is going to come across here, as you can see. So I've gone slightly larger to start with, but then we can change. So I can change the angle on here of the horn if I want the other one sticking up slightly more. We could do that just for a bit of extra interest. We can change the angle on there. Okay, and then for our final piece, again, so the grain, now we want going back the same way as the starting position, and we then have that one attached like so. Now, depending on the size of the piece, you could put a strengthening rod in there. So you could put a bit of wire or a nail, a thin pin, drill into there and drill into these sides to hold it together, which is what I've done here when joining onto the puppet. So when you want to join it onto the puppet, it's a good idea, a bit of extra strength, is to put a pin, because then it locates it nicely and it will keep it nice and firm in the position that you want when you glue it on. Okay, so we've got a dab of glue on here. You can use an activator if you want as well. Just makes the glue go off a bit quicker. Two bits together. Then going to do the same with the bottom joint. Okay, so when you're happy, you can glue this bit together. Again, I'm going to use a little bit of activator just to make it set quicker. And when you're ready, we can carve away. So I find with this piece it's going to be easier to carve it afterwards, because otherwise you've got to get your joins perfect before you start. So think about that if you're joining multiple pieces together, that you want to you might be able to shape them better when they're once they're together, rather than do all the shaping. But if it's a simple sort of T-joint, then obviously you can do that. Like I say, if you're making any sort of hammer or a gun or something like that, then you could do most of the work before you do the joining. Going to now pare away and carve it to the shape that we want. Okay, now when you're happy with the piece that you've made and you want to attach it to your other part, unless you've got a dead square joint, so you've got two completely square planes to attach to, the one way to get a good shaping, particularly when you've got a curved surface like this on this helmet, is to hollow out the inside of where it connects. So you're not trying to now connect two planes together. You can leave an edge. If we hollow out on the inside here, need quite a small tool for this. So if we make a hollow, now all we've got is this outside edge now to make contact, so it's going to be slightly easier for you to get those surfaces to match up. So if I show you on this one, maybe you can see how I've hollowed out on the inside. So it means you get less of the glue to connect, but it does make for a tighter joint, so it makes it easier to fit it nicely. And because we've got this pin as well, that should hold it on quite solidly. So that's what we want to do there. So I just need to shape that now to fit, and then pop a pin in that side, and then I've got my two horns on the helmet.